This is the chimney that's suspect for where the leak is in the house, and here we've got the flashing. There's been quite a lot of silicone caulking around the flashing. The problem with silicone caulking is it doesn't last very long, and it sometimes forms a path for the water to follow. What has got to happen really is the flashings need to be removed. The counter flashing underneath needs to be checked to make sure that's working properly, and I'd actually recommend by putting in a deeper counter flashing, because we have a bit of interesting roof geometry here. Depending on the way in which the rain's going to come, it could actually be hitting the wall. We've got a considerable flow of water coming in and around this area, and it's finding its way up and over the step flashing. The step flashing, well, sorry, the counter flashing is here. The step flashing is below us here. And what I'm saying is that large volumes of water can come up here, and they go up between the actual step flashing and the counter flashing. It literally siphons it in, goes over the top, and you've got water in. This illustration here shows the assembly of the counter flashing on a chimney, or even on any wall at a roof wall interface. Below us is the attic, and the chimney continues down. And inside the attic are various structural elements that brace the chimney and hold the roof in close proximity to it. Now, because the chimney and the roof have to move independently, the roof is made of wood, chimney is made of stone, they expand and contract at different rates. The roof and the actual chimney cannot be directly attached, they've got to actually slide. And so what we do is we install this step flashing, it's shown here, and it extends out underneath the shingle, and then it extends up the wall. And it should extend up the wall for a minimum of 8 inches. Over the top of that we've got a counter flashing. It's like having a small roof. It's inset into the concrete of the brickwork, and it comes out and it bends over. And so now we have the chimney with its counter flashing protecting the step flashing, and the step flashing is keeping the water from flowing in, and of course the water comes down the roof, but it comes in all directions. And the issue is that if it comes here and we don't have a big air gap, we should have an air gap here. If we don't have a large air gap, the water's going to go in and underneath the or between the counter flashing and the step flashing, and it will go into the attic, because remember the attic is open at this stage. So in this illustration here, what we have is the counter flashing. This is the counter flashing. It goes into the brickwork, and there's bricks above us. And it's inset in mortar. That seals it. So this is the counter flashing. Look, it comes out like a roof itself. Then here is the step flashing. This actually steps down the roof, the slope of the roof. Now the problem is, if water comes down here at sufficient rate, it's going to rise up and over the counter flashing. And that's one reason why we want a gap, because if we've got a gap here, the water cannot fill this volume here, because if it gets into there, it's going to be drawn in, it's going to be sucked into the house by vacuum. So we want an air gap, just as we have an air gap on a hose bit, we want an air gap. In addition to having the air gap, we want sufficient depth of the flashing. So this depth ideally is 8 inches or more. Sometimes it's not possible, but we should get as close to that 8 inches as possible, so that we've got a good depth of flashing and it reduces the probability of water coming in. Now this phenomena explains why it is often the case that you go for many years without getting a water leak, because the geometry of the roof actually directs the water away from this area until we get rain and wind in a particular direction that drives the water into that area, and that's when the water leaks. So it's not something that's going to happen all the time, but it will happen from time to time. So in summary, water runs off the roof, comes down and hits the flashing. If there's not sufficient air gap, it's going to actually get sucked into the roof. It rises up between the counter and the step flashing, and then enters the attic, and that's how you get the occasional water leak.